So today I just want to particularly focus on examples so that we go through the exercise itself and you are able to see with reference to typical examples other than just talking and speaking about it at a theoretical level. So what we will understand, what you will bear in mind as you go through that writing process or the process of answering that identification question, you will see that the moment you focus on these three aspects, the moment you focus on giving out a definition and giving examples and showing us the significance of a given event, of a given person, a historical character, a quotation, or a place, you are going to automatically address some key components which are very, very essential in you getting the best credit you need for that identification question. So the first approach are what we call the 5 journalistic principles. The moment you focus on these three, 1, 2, 3, automatically it's going to come out. Those 5 journalistic principles are going to come out. Those 5 journalistic principles are just centered on those words that you see right there. What, who, where, when, and why. So if we are going to read a passage that you are going to submit as an answer for an identification question, if it does not answer those 5 key elements, depending on whether it's a question about a place, it's a question about an event, a historical character, it doesn't answer the question. It's as simple as that. So that is why it's very important to master that structure. You might have a lot of content in your head. You might have a lot of stuff to say. But as long as it doesn't answer those 5 key questions, or as long as it doesn't address those 5 journalistic principles, it doesn't answer the question. It might actually make sense. It might be very grammatical in terms of English, but it doesn't answer the question. So we are going to take note of that as we are going to give the answers as we start to deal with the examples. The second approach, so you might not want to think about this when answering your question, which is the first approach, the 5 journalistic principles. But you might want to think of another approach which there's a scholar I like so much. His name is Robert Barclay. I'm going to give you a piece of his article that contains much of the theory that we are discussing today. So he advances what he calls a second approach to answering an identification question, and he talks about what he says is a short form. It's just EBAD. EBAD is just a representation of 4 key words that must come out in the passage that you write as you answer an identification question. Number 1, identify. Before, after, and during. If you just bear in mind these 4 words as you answer your identification question, you are going to automatically address the needs that we are looking for. The needs of a definition, an example, and you are going to that's going to help us to see the significance of whatever you are answering. Whether it's a historical quotation, it's a place, it's what. That is going to help you. So it's either you're going to take this approach or you're going to take the first approach. But either way, you are going to feed us with what we want, which is these 3 elements. So it's going to be up to you to choose which approach you prefer depending on how you understand things. So quickly now, we want to do examples. Bearing in mind the theory that we have already, we now want to put it into practice and actually attempt to answer questions, because that is what you are going to do in the exam. But the exam is a very different kind of setting, because you are not discussing, you don't have access to sources, you can't read a book, you can't take it from there. It has to come from your head, so you have to be well read and well practiced, because reading alone is not enough. These questions are very structured, and that is why we teach the theory. So now I'm going to want us to pick some characters, some places from the pool of examples that we have here, and we're going to try to answer them and see if they can meet, if they can feed the demands of the theory that we have right here on board. So I'm sure that most of you are familiar with what I've put on the board right here. And we even discussed some of these characters in the previous session. So I'm going to pick the Mfekane first, because we didn't talk about it in a previous session. I'm going to pick up the Mfekane, and I want you to write it down. I'm not saying it's in the exam. It might be in the exam. But if it is, it's going to be very helpful if we attempt it collectively. It will be easier to answer it on an individual basis if you got the concept of answering it as a collective. So now, let's put down the Mfekane. How many of us remember the Mfekane? Amen. So you see, the entire class knows the Mfekane. So how many are willing to volunteer to just give us a brief definition of what the Mfekane was? I'll take, so okay, let me take you. Yeah. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah. This is he says it's a series of wars that happened in Southern Africa, to be particular, in the early 1800s. This is what he's saying. So this is a very good definition of what the Mfekane was. And what else can we say about the Mfekane that can feed information, or that can feed this theoretical requirement that we have? What else? What else can we say about it? Yes? That is perfect. That is wonderful. So this is very important, because apart from just giving the definition of what the Mfekane was, we now know its central significance to the course material, because we've gotten the answer that this is the historical event that leads to much of state formation in Southern Africa. That is a very, very important point. It can address this part. It can answer this part. Why is the Mfekane so important? It is important because this is the historical event. This is the series of wars that led to the formation of so many African states in Southern Africa. That's very important. So let's quickly move to another example. Let's pick up Cecil Rhodes. So how many of you know Cecil Rhodes? Most of you know Cecil Rhodes. We actually did an example of Cecil Rhodes in the previous session. But I'm going to do something here. And I want you to think and observe closely and try to make sense of something. I'm going to read you a quotation. And as I read this quotation, I want us to use this theory, this very same theory that we have on board, to try and make sense of what is in the passage. So I'm going to read it, and listen closely. I'll read it twice. And you might remember it from the course material. My cherished idea is a solution for the social problem. That is, in order to save the 40 million inhabitants of the United Kingdom from a bloody civil war, we colonial statesmen must acquire new lands to settle the surplus population, to provide new markets for the goods produced in the factories and mines. The empire, as I have always said, is a bread and butter question. If you want to avoid civil war, you must become an imperialist. I'll read it again. My cherished idea is a solution for the social problem. That is, in order to save the 40 million inhabitants of the United Kingdom from a bloody civil war, we colonial statesmen must acquire new lands to settle the surplus population, to provide new markets for the goods produced in the factories and mines. The empire, as I've always said, is a bread and butter question. If you want to avoid civil war, you must become imperialists. How many of you remember this? You remember this? Wow, it's the entire class, right? So now, in what context is this quotation coming from? And who is saying this? And why is it so important for us in this study? Remember our theory. So let me take you, and then I'll bring you in. Yeah. Would you want to add something? Yes.
And part of this was also like, you know, the conflict
Yes, that's very important. So this quotation, most of you were able to see that this was who? This was Cecil Rhodes. This is what Cecil Rhodes said. And it's a quotation from 1895. And it's him giving his opinion on how to solve the social problem that had been created by the depression that she talked about, that had also been created by the Industrial Revolution. So this is why we argue that the Industrial Revolution accelerated the scramble and partition of Africa. That's why that quotation is very important. So if we are able to establish the connection between the Industrial Revolution and the imposition of colonial rule in Africa through quotations such as this and through the roles or the individual roles played by people like Cecil Rhodes, we will have successfully answered an identification question that comes in that form. One last example, and we can move to the essay section. So we're going to take one or two last examples. I think we have time for two more. So let me pick one from pre-colonial social and economic systems, because we've been focusing on colonialism more. So let me pick up the Neolithic Revolution. How many of you remember it? Wonderful, this is good. So most of you remember it. So what was the Neolithic Revolution? This time I'll take you first. Yeah.
Basically, groups of people in the African continent went from a nomadic to a more like a settled state, state society.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. The movement from nomadism or from nomadic pastoralism to a more settled and agrarian-based kind of settlement. It's a very, very important definition. What else do you want to say about this? Or maybe put it differently. Yes, I'll take you. Wonderful. That is a very important point. The transformation from Stone Age societies to Iron Age societies. So the discovery of iron was very, very key to this transformation that we're talking about, to the Neolithic and revolution that we're talking about. But there's one important point that must show us the significance of this revolution to the history of Southern Africa, or to the history of Africa in general. What is it? Yes? What? Wonderful. That is the most important point. The Neolithic Revolution is the revolution. It is the historical event, the process that gave birth to state formation. This is the revolution that gave birth to that, because the discovery of iron, the transformation from Stone Age societies, hunter-gatherer kind of societies, or nomadic kind of societies to settled states was facilitated by the occurrence of the Neolithic Revolution. That is why it's very important to us. Lastly, as we quickly go through this so that we can be able to start talking about essay questions, let's talk more about the Berlin Conference. I'm so concerned about this conference. So it's very important. So the Berlin Conference is a very important, historical event to us. But now, how best can we define this conference? I'll take you.
So the Berlin Conference was a conference in 18...
Oh yes, it started in November 1884 and ended in February 1885. Yeah.
Anyway, there was what was recognized the Scramble for Africa by...
I want you to stop there so that I give others. But thank you. That's a very good definition of the Berlin Conference. Now this is the convention called upon by who called upon this convention? Do you remember this guy? Who? Yes, it's King Leopold advised somebody else to organize the conference. Who was that? Yes. That's Bismarck. That's Otto von Bismarck from Germany. So King Leopold recommended to Bismarck that organize such a conference so that some discussion can be done about colonization. But as we talk about the Berlin Conference, here's what's more important, and that's why I stopped, that answer, because I want others to chip in as well. What is also very, very important about the Berlin Conference is for us to be able to give the particular examples of what was agreed at the conference and why that conference is significant to us. So I want two people to just tell us what was agreed. What was agreed at the conference. I'll take you and then you. So you can start. Mm-hmm. Wonderful. That's good. That's good. Yes. Wonderful. Yes. Sphere of influence. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Wonderful. That's a very good answer. So now overall, I'll give a brief summary. But overall, what was then the significance of the conference in relation to the course? What was the significance of all that was agreed there? What? Yes? Wonderful, wonderful. The officialization, formalization of colonialism was done by the Berlin Conference. That is the significance of all those examples that you are giving of what was agreed at the conference. The principle of sphere of influence, the principle of effective occupation is enshrined or is articulated in the General Act of Berlin, that which was enacted in 1885, is the one that recommended that we set rules and regulations that govern the process of imposing colonial rule. The answer that she gave is very important, that it was recommended that treaties and concessions must be signed so that you officialize and formalize your occupation of a given territory. That is why you see we had the Rat Concession, the Moffat Treaty. Wherever European colonizers went, they first made sure that they sign a concession or a treaty with the local chiefs there so that they can formalize that colonialism. It was all done by the agreements of the Berlin Conference. That is why it's very important for us in this course material. So now let's quickly move to essay questions. And essay questions are very, very simple. From the face of it, like from just first glance, you might think it's easy. I'm just going to write an introduction, a body, and conclusion. I'm done. It's not as easy as you think, because organizing thoughts and reading about them are two different things. This is going to be a skill that you will need to perfect so much so that this is an easier process for you and you can get the grade that you want. Now, as we look at this, we have an introduction, we have a body, we have a conclusion. But I'll give you just a small illustration that can show you why it's important to answer things in a structured way. So how many of you have, in the middle of talking with a friend of yours, or whether it's family or what, that person you are talking to says something like, "Do you understand what I'm saying?" Asking you whether you understand what he or she is saying, but he's been saying it for a long time, for a very long time. That's one question. The other is when you're talking to someone, and at the closing, as he closes the sentence, he says something like, "Do you know what I mean?" How many of you? All of you have come across this, right? So why do they say that? Why do people who are speaking to us say that? Yes?
Well, sometimes, like,
Oh, yes. Wonderful. Yes?
Sometimes when people are explaining something,
Mm-hmm.
there really is no structure to what they're saying.
Wonderful. That is very, very important. When people are speaking, there is no clearly defined structure in speech. People just say stuff. So in certain instances, it might be that they feel like they are no longer making sense, or they feel like you don't understand what they are saying. So that is why they ask. But the good thing about speech is that you have room to ask, "Do you understand?" And you say yes. "Do you understand?" And you say no. There is room for that. But when it comes to writing, the room is not always there. The luxury of choice, the latitude is not always there, because When you write something, you submit it, and then I grade it, and then I give it back. So there's no room for you to say, oh, do you know what I mean? No. It's over. We have graded it. You have given us your answers. We are going to give a grade based on what we see on the paper, not what you are going to say when the paper is submitted. So that is why structure is very important. What I know for a fact is that as you prepare for the exam, you are going to do a lot of reading. But we don't want to put that reading to waste. Reading a lot, you get a question, you answer it in a very unstructured way. The moment that happens, we know that we have not done a good job. This theory must be understood and must be understood very well. So now, the first thing that essay that you're going to write must do is to give us an introduction. This is very basic, and I'm sure that you know this. You have probably done it in other classes that you have taken. The introduction that we are going to give a credit that is way higher than any other introduction is one that says 4 things. Those 4 things that you see right there. It is one that does 4 things. Number 1, it orientates the reader. Number 2, it identifies the focus and the purpose. Number 3, it outlines the scope. And number 4, it states the thesis or the line of argument. Those 4 important